Episode 92 of the Joomla Beat podcast, and this week I have Simon Kloostra, all the way from the Netherlands, giving us helpful SEO tips for your Joomla websites.
Latest Joomla news, design tips, marketing ideas, and interviews with experts in the industry.
Beginner or professional, this podcast is for Joomla enthusiasts.
Welcome to the Joomla Beat podcast with your host, Peter Buey.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Joomla Beat podcast, the podcast all about designing, developing, managing, and marketing your Joomla website. I'm your host, Peter Buey, and joining me is the lovely
Martina Kotzian.
I try and change that up each week, but it doesn't seem to change,
noticed.
does it?
No.
I keep on saying lovely.
I
You're
know.
more than just lovely.
Really? Am I? I don't really see myself as lovely, but okay.
What do you see yourself as then?
I don't know.
Anyway, moving right along. We have a couple of news updates this week, but then after that we also have the interview I did with Simon Kloostra. He submitted one of his websites to the Joomla Beat website showcase. I was going through the submissions and I saw his website and it looks pretty cool. Lots of useful resources in regards to SEO. So very helpful for anyone that wants to optimize their website. So
He's given us some tips as well, hasn't he?
yeah, some tips, some hints and tips, and he gave me a lot of tips for the Joomla Beat website. It was actually kind of embarrassing.
Really?
Yeah, but anyway, you'll hear that later in the podcast. So, first off, before we get into anything else, let's just do a big shout out for Seblod, the guys that are sponsoring this podcast episode and have been for the whole month, which is absolutely fantastic. Haven't had a sponsor for a whole month before, but they are doing their Seblod training course. And if you want to find out more about that, how to up your game with Joomla and build some really complex apps and really cool, funky stuff with Joomla and Seblod, go to joomlabe.at/Seblod and you can sign up for the training course there. It's free. It's all free. There is some.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I know. To get a little bit better in Joomla and to build some really cool things, why not? It's all there. James is doing an excellent job and he'll be joining us later on the podcast too. All right, let's get into some Joomla news.
Looking for more Joomla tips and industry news? JoomlaB.at. Web hosting by SiteGround.
All right, so first off, what's going on? Not much this week. It's pretty quiet.
Well, what happened with Joomla Minnesota?
Ah, yeah, that's right. That happened last weekend, just past. Looked pretty big. I was following it on the Twitter feed, and a lot of photos, a lot of food, and a lot of theme parks.
Oh, that's right. It was at that shopping mall with the theme park.
Yeah, that's right. I saw a couple of photos of like the roller coaster inside and everything. It looked pretty big, and some of the presentations looked pretty good too. But you have to jump on the Twitter feed or the website to get those links and resources.
Was there an awards ceremony?
No, not this one. But I believe they had quite a large turnout, 250 people plus speakers and event people. So that's quite a good turnout. Compared to, what do we get here in Australia? Maybe 100 if we're lucky at one of our events.
That's because we don't have a theme park.
Yeah. Well, the next one for Australia, Joomla Day Australia, is being held in Brisbane. You can go surfing afterwards, I guess.
Oh, you could go to the Gold Coast. There's some theme parks around there.
Yeah, just a little bit further down the
Wet and
coast.
Wild or
Exactly.
Dream World.
Anyway, far away from the sharks.
Yes.
Yes, like that. If you haven't been watching or you haven't been around that big shark attack in South Africa.
An Aussie, he's an Aussie surfer, wasn't he?
Mick Flanning?
Something like that.
I can't
just
remember
punched
now.
a shark in the mouth.
Well, that's the way Australians do it. They punch sharks in the face and then just
that's
keep
what I'll
swimming.
do, definitely. Yeah.
Anyway. If you want to check out more and find out more what actually happened at Joomla Day Minnesota, make sure you jump on the Joomla Beat website and follow the links from the podcast episode here in the show notes, and you find out all the links, all the photos, and everything else that are compiled on there for you. Very useful. In other news, the Joomla UX team, the user experience team, are calling for volunteers.
That's exciting.
Yes. So if you're design orientated, you know user experience, and you can help improve the admin interface of the Joomla project in the next release, or maybe a couple of releases down, Crystal Harris is leading up that team and is putting out a call for volunteers. And you can find that blog post on Joomla.org. All you have to do is fill in the Google Doc, which is linked there, and put in your experiences, and hopefully you can help contribute that way. Will you be contributing, Martina?
Oh, I'll definitely check it out and see if I can help.
See what you can do. Maybe it's your first foray. Is that the right word? Into the Joomla world? Oh, dear.
It wouldn't be my first foray.
Fair enough. All right. What else we got? I think that is it for this week in regards to Joomla news. Anything else to add, Martina?
Not that I can think of, no.
All right. Let's get into this interview with Simon Kloostra. It's a pretty good interview. The only downside is I had to call him directly on his phone, so the audio quality is a little bit bad, but I did the best I could to brighten up the audio and clean it up. But anyway, let's get right into it.
Stay tuned as Peter brings his special guest to the table. The Joomla Beat Podcast.
Record 160. That's the phone number. Everything's good. It's working.
Well, perfect.
Let's get into it before it stops working.
Yeah, it sounds very wise.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's I know it was a little bit last minute as well, but I was looking through the submissions and I saw your site and I was going through it just to make sure it wasn't spam or anything, and I thought, wow, this is actually really good content. This is really good stuff. And you wrote a lot of content, so yeah, I had to get you on.
Well, that's very good. Very nice to hear that.
Yeah, I think the listeners are going to get a lot out of this. But let's kick this off. First off, can I get you to just say a little hello to the Joomla Beat listeners by saying, I've got it here on the info sheet. Say, I'm Simon Kloostra from JoomlaSEO and author of Joomla 3 SEO and Performance, and you're listening to the Joomla Beat podcast.
Okay, hi, I'm Simon Kloostra from JoomlaSEO.com, also author of Joomla 3 SEO and Performance, and thanks for having me on Joomla Beat podcast.
Perfect. All right, cool. That recording was really good too. Audio is great. I can't complain. All right, let's get into this.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So, Simon, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure having you here. But before we get into all the bits and pieces in regards to the search engine optimization and the hints and tips that you're going to give to the listeners, could you please tell me a little bit about yourself, where you live, and how you're actually involved with Joomla?
Okay, no problem. Well, I'm Simon. I'm actually living in the Netherlands, in a small town near Utrecht. Actually, I'm working in Utrecht myself, which is in the middle of the Netherlands. And yeah, about my background, I came a long way before I entered Joomla. I studied agriculture for 6 years, but couldn't find a job, and then got into IT. Working for a bank for about 15 years until I got fed up with it, working for a boss and only spending, time with business that I didn't really like. So then I basically dropped everything, restarted, and started web designing. Because I thought, well, if I can read a little bit of code in the bank, I can probably do it with a website. And that's actually how I jumped into web design. And I chose Joomla pretty soon from the beginning. Doubted it between WordPress and Joomla, but then stuck to Joomla. So that's more or less how I came into the business.
Fantastic. It sounds like you had quite a bit of a jump from career to career, starting agriculture in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's quite a contrast to where you are now. But you've slowly started building up more and more websites. Is that what you did? You're just working with clients?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixture. For most part, I work for clients, and most of those just need a website and want me to build it. But especially since I started the blog and focused on SEO, I get more and more businesses which have a strong SEO part. And sometimes the people ask me just for the SEO part of a project. Mm-hmm. So it's now also more a cooperation between other web designers sometimes.
Interesting. So you step in and you're the expert in terms of getting the site up to speed in SEO-wise.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Cool. So I mentioned this as a fairly important step if anyone is out there in the community or just trying to build a business, the search engine optimizing your site is critical to help get more customers in. So I'm going to pick your brains a little bit more later on. But essentially I found you from the podcast show directory, which I'm trying to start up at the moment, and you submitted your site, Joomla SEO, and you put it on the showcase directory, and that's how I found you. So I was looking around your site, and I found that your blog, your articles, there's a huge wealth of information there. So for anyone's listening, you can check it out at JoomlaSEO.com. And you've also written a book. It looks pretty interesting. Yeah. I haven't had a chance to go through it, but could you tell the listeners a little bit about the book?
Yeah, well, actually, it pretty much evolved from the website. At some point, I thought, I could see that there's a lot of interest in my blog, and I made a pretty much a large PDF of the whole book. But while the website is more separate parts, the book is more of a one thing to read from start to end. And a few months after I published the PDF, which was basically a download on my website, I got some interest from a publisher called Apress, mm-hmm. and they said they really liked the PDF and would like to publish it. So then I went through the whole editing process, which really improved the English of the book quite a bit, because I'm not native, and the first version didn't have a lot of editing. So I think that improved the book a lot. But it's pretty much evolved from itself. So it wasn't a preset of plan to publish a book like this.
Very interesting. So it's just come about from your writing in general and showing your expertise in search engine optimization. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's get into the meat of this and what the listeners are really after. And that's a whole bunch of tips from you in regards to how and what to do in regards to search engine optimizing their Joomla website. So how many tips do you want to give the listeners?
Well, okay, I suppose I could give them about 5 of the top hits.
All right, cool. Top 5 tips. Let's start at number 1. What have you got for the listeners?
Well, the first one is a bit of a funny one, but this is basically don't just focus on SEO only. I see a lot of people that jump into SEO, read a lot about SEO and how they should build their website. And then the result is that, from an SEO perspective, the site might look very good, but the site's boring. Their texts are really funny with a lot of, keywords within the text that they otherwise would not use. So I would always say, keep SEO in the back of your mind when building a website, but don't make it your first priority. It's your users that should be the first priority. And then you make, content that's interesting and people want to read it. And a lot of visitors will come from that, and Google will probably recognize it. And then, optimize it from a technical perspective and make it even better so that Google can even better crawl your site. But I think that's a priority that's very important to keep in the back of your head. Well, then a second tip would be, SEO, one of the priorities that you want to reach is, how can I get as high as possible in the Google search engine result pages? But secondly, you might also be able to score pretty well with a result that is a bit lower on the page, as long as you make sure that your site result looks very interesting for users to click on. And that means that you should really make a lot of work of optimizing how that result looks, which is the page title and the meta description. And not just for the home page, but for all the pages of the site, or at least the pages that you would like to score high with in Google. And that's a lot of work that I can also, I've often seen, by improving the meta description, you can get twice as much clicks for the same Google result page. Well, my meta description sometimes sound a bit simple to people, but it's really critical to write those with a lot of attention.
So this is when a user types in their username and not username, password. This is when a user types in their search query into Google, for example, and that results page is what we're optimizing there. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yes.
So every single title and every description of whatever comes up from your website, we're trying to optimize to the perfect click-through ratio, or trying to get that perfect click-through ratio from the user searching. So how do you pick and how do you write the perfect titles and meta descriptions for your pages?
Well, of course, you've got to use the right keywords. Everybody knows about keywords these days, but you also got to keep in mind to use the keywords that your users would use, and not the keywords that you would like to score for. Often those should be the same, but I often see mismatches when. Well, I recently had a company which was big in getting directors for schools, and they were focusing on directors. It's not the perfect English word, I think, but they were focusing on the plural, while they didn't realize a school that needs a director needs a director, and there was actually a big mismatch in. And by writing good meta description page titles, they could score a lot better. And that's only a simple example. So, yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting.
And that's basically the most important thing. Entice your readers.
Entice your readers. I'm finding that the very first two tips that you've given us are very user-focused at the moment.
Sorry, I didn't understand your question. I couldn't hear it.
The very first two tips that you've given the listeners are very user-focused. The very first one is like design the site and build it for the user. And then the next one, the meta titles and meta descriptions, write them from the user's perspective as well. That's very interesting.
Yes, that's correct. And I think that needs to be in the back of our mind. And then, of course, we can get more technical. So a third tip would be when you start building your site, make sure that from the start on your basic setup is correct. So make sure your search engine friendly URLs are switched on, which is currently the default in Joomla. So that shouldn't be a problem. But also URL rewriting is something that is good to switch on right when you build a site. People often find this a bit of a technical term, and what's this? And I'm not going to touch this. But they don't realize that if they know what it is and they turn it on a year after the site is live, all the URLs change. So make sure that you have the basic setup in your global configuration set up right from the start, and you don't have to worry about that afterwards.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. And that's a short tip, and that's easy to follow, I think.
It's just a couple of clicks in the configuration of Joomla just to turn those things on. Or you have to change the HT access file as well, usually. But it's pretty straightforward to do. Cool.
And that should be basic. Yeah.
And tip number 4?
Well, tip number 4 is to really make sure you build a logical structure in your site. You can build structures in several ways, with your categories and with your menu setup. And often I choose to mirror the both. So when you look at JoomlaSEO.com, I have you see in the menu that I have an SEO checklist, a performance checklist, and some SEO extensions. And actually, I have categories for those, and I have a category block for the SEO checklist then, and a category block for the performance as well. And the menu item is also called performance. And then below that, I have the individual articles. So I have the homepage first, as sitting basically on top of the pyramid, then the main menu, and under that, the individual articles. And I emphasize that by using stuff like breadcrumbs, which creates internal links, which helps Google to see through the structure of your site. And this is very important, to build a logical structure which is hierarchical. Don't just have a large menu with 15 items. Try to create a structure in that, because the structure, it helps to understand Google what's the site about, but it also helps to see what are the most important pages of the site. And also, if you have a correct structure, if you have a new article, it's very easy to where to put it.
Interesting. I find this is one of the very good points in Joomla compared to something like WordPress. I find when you set something up in WordPress, or the articles, usually when people set them up, they just all go to the root level, the top level URL, as opposed to having some sort of structure such as performance or checklist like you do.
Yeah.
Do you find that helps?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it helps a lot if you do it correctly. It builds stronger pages, especially the pages higher up in the pyramid, like the SEO checklist. Mm-hmm. That's becoming a very strong page because of all the underlying articles. It helps to build a strong category page for the checklist. The only thing is that if you build a structure like this, you also got to make sure that the category page is also a strong page. So often you see blogs or lists of articles where the category page is basically an empty page with just some summaries of articles. I usually try to make this a strong page as well by giving it a unique text and then offering the underlying articles.
That's interesting. So the pages under that particular category boost up that top level category that they're all in. And then you write unique content for. Okay, all right. So this is completely different to how I do my blog on the Joomla Beat website.
Yeah, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong, and sometimes you have sites where this simply does not apply. So, and of course, it doesn't mean your site will score bad if you don't do it this way. Because I think the Joomla Beat site is a pretty solid website that scores pretty good in Google. I encounter it every now and then while I'm Googling around, so it's pretty strong. But by emphasizing those top pages, you might even do better.
Interesting. Okay. I might have to work on the resources section of the website and also the showcase area. I think they're a little bit weak, but yes. Good tip. Okay. So that was, which one was that? That was number 4?
Number 4. Yeah.
Okay, so tip number 5. What do we got?
Well, tip number 5 is to check for crawl errors in your site, which is basically pages that are not found and that are linked to in parts of your website. And often, you don't even notice yourself, but it could be a dead link in a footer or an internal link that you created, and maybe you renamed the article to which you were linking, and stuff like that is constantly creating new 404 errors from within the site architecture, and often that if you have too many of those links, that could be pretty bad for, well, first of all, those pages won't rank, and if that's a strong symptom in your site, it's a symptom of bad site architecture, and you should try and do something about it. And there are pretty easy to use tools that can easily help you to crawl your site from all the URLs that you have. One of those tools is called Screaming Frog SEO Spider. It's a desktop tool, and you simply type in your URL and let it crawl, and you get a lot of information. I use it a lot of the times, and I think it's the most popular SEO tool that is around, and it's free. And one of the things is it helps you detect those 404 errors. And even really good sites often have 404 errors.
So that's called Screaming Frog SEO Spider.
Yeah, it's a funny name.
Who comes up with these names? That's crazy.
Yeah.
At least you can't forget it.
Yeah. And it's free to use for sites up to 500 URLs, which is, fine for most smaller sites. Most of my sites don't reach that number, so I'm still using the free version, even though I use it a lot. Very
cool. All right, I'll definitely pick that one up and give it a go and see what happens. So that's some awesome, really, really awesome top 5 tips there that you've given the listeners. So first off, let's just do a quick recap. When you're building a site, don't just focus on SEO. Keep it in the back of your mind, but focus on the user first. Second tip there, pay careful attention to the meta titles, your title tags, and also your meta descriptions to try and get the best click-through rates from your search results page. Then your third tip, make sure your configuration is done right. So the CEF URLs and URL writing is configured right from the very beginning when you start developing the site. That's a very important tip, I think.
Yes.
And then fourth tip, categorization, structure, breadcrumbs to make sure that it's all structured properly.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, your final tip there, the crawl errors, just checking the site and crawling to see if there are any broken links, etc. throughout the site. That's pretty good too. And that little tool that you gave there was pretty good. Last but not least, I'm going to be a little bit cheeky here, and you've probably had a look at the Joomla Beat website. And I have to ask, what do you think? What can I do in regards to ripping this apart and showing the listeners in regards to what I could possibly do? And then I'll probably will action a couple of these things to see if there's any result changes in regards to the amount of traffic that comes in afterwards. Have you had a look?
Yeah, well, of course, I had a quick look. I usually do that. First thing I looked at is performance. My blog is about SEO and performance, and I've started focusing on SEO, but performance, it's not directly SEO, but a fast site is usually experience much better than a small site. So I usually take a look at that. And I think your site is organized pretty well. But one thing I noticed it has quite a few of external connections to Facebook or Twitter. I think I'm not quite sure. I didn't look at exactly what they're doing.
I think I put everything on there.
Yeah. But out of 1.6 megabyte for the homepage, almost 1 megabyte is JavaScript, and I think almost 80% of that is external JavaScript. So and that's a very common error of performance. Not that the site is slow, but it could probably be quicker if you could reduce on that. So when I use social media stuff, I usually try to see if there isn't there something very simple HTML CSS solution that is close, or sometimes you have extension that allow for JavaScript activation only after you click a button, and that can help a lot. But then, but that's often you also see that it's with your existing functionality. It could be dependent a lot on what you have. So rebuilding that is often easier said than done.
Yeah.
But then, yeah. And then secondly, as far as SEO is concerned, something. Well, I already mentioned it in the quick tips. Crawl your site with the SEO Screaming Frog tool, and I found four errors to it looks like some template providers that you have a partnership with, SiteGround. So I found four pages that seem to be linked to within the structure of your site, but they don't exist. So check those pages, see if there's something wrong with those pages, and maybe reroute those four errors or create the pages if you really need them. And then secondly, while browsing to them, I found that you were still using the default Joomla 404 page, the red and white page.
Yeah, it's ugly and it's scary for users. They see it and they go, "Ooh, no, I broke something."
Yeah. They think they routed to another site or so. So it's not necessarily bad for Google, but I think for user experience, it could be improved. But I think you knew that already. That's something else. Often on the site, it is advised to have a hierarchical order in your header tag. So start with an H1 tag, then a few H2, and then H3. And on your article pages, I think that structure is usually present. But on quite a few other pages, there is no H1 tag. Mm-hmm. And it won't kill you, but it would be better if there would be one.
Okay, so put the H1 tags in on every page?
Yeah, it would usually be advised. Mm-hmm. And then I've looked at the meta descriptions, and I can see that on and off there is a meta description or not. That's often how it goes, especially on new sites. I see people often, I know I need to fill in those meta descriptions, and then after a year or so, you're more in a rush, and or you create an article and you're tired and you don't want to create a meta description. You think I'll do it tomorrow, and you forget about it.
There's a lot to do.
Yeah. So it's all easy said, but then to go over it and write correct meta description, that's a lot of work. But that would definitely be a tip.
Yep.
And then also the page titles, I can see that they're often too long, because Google usually has room for only 60 characters or so. It depends a bit on the pixel width actually, but 60 characters is more or less a rule of thumb. And often they are too long to be displayed on the Google results page, so your page titles might be broken off.
Okay.
But also that requires configuration, because they are usually derived from the Joomla article title. And if you got a long title that you think is correct, you would probably still want to keep that, while still configuring a slightly shorter page title, and that can be tricky in Joomla. That's not always easy.
Interesting.
You would want to separate those two, but there are tools for that. But,
okay.
And then finally, I saw that you went to JoomlaBeat and then /robots.txt. You can simply read it. It looks a bit outdated, because in recent Joomla upgrades they provided a new robots.txt file, and they unblocked the media folder and the templates folder. Mm-hmm. And that can often be a problem for sites to pass the mobile-friendly test, because Google is then disallowed to crawl parts of your site that contain your template stuff. Now, I did the mobile-friendly test for your site, and it passed, so I think your CSS probably moved to a location where they can be accessed, but, still it would be a good idea to follow the Joomla trend and update the robots.txt file. Okay,
cool.
Yeah. And those are just a few that
you had more?
You see, criticism is always very easy, and solving it takes more time.
Yeah. So you came up with a bit of a list there, and I think it will take me quite a long time to go through all that and optimize all the meta descriptions, etc., and making sure the tag's right. But I think the effort's worth it if you want to rank well and rank above the competition. So I will give it a try. I'll see what we can do. What I'll do at this point is I'll put a little screenshot and maybe a snapshot in regards to the amount of traffic that is coming through to the website at the moment, and maybe some of the key pages on the site. And then I'll do a breakdown in a few months' time after I've done all these changes and tweaks, and see what happens. See if the traffic increases, see what other pages start climbing up the ranks. Fingers crossed they do. And well, hopefully more people will come and buy your book because of these tips, and they can actually see the proof in the pudding. They can see that, from these changes and the suggestions that you've made, the results are actually there as well. Speaking of which, speaking of which, how can people follow you? Where can they find out more about you, and how can they get a copy of this fantastic book of yours?
Well, pretty much everything I do, I publish on the JoomlaSEO.com website, especially on the blog section. I usually publish an article that is hopefully interesting with regards to SEO, every 3 or 4 weeks or so. Mm-hmm. Also, I promote everything at least on Twitter, which is at Simon Kloostra, which is simply my name. And then on Twitter, that's where I usually publish all the updates. And also, I usually Twitter about recent developments, interesting stuff with regards to SEO or Joomla. So you can follow me there. And then about the book, of course, I would love people to buy it. I spent a lot of time writing it. And it's published with A-Press. And I think the easiest way to buy it worldwide is to buy it on Amazon.com. You could buy it both as a print book and as an ebook. And it should be with you pretty soon. And then one thing I would really appreciate is that people have reviews about the book. There are a few now, and they're pretty good. But I always love to hear what people think about my book. And of course, if it's good, it's even better. But criticism is always possible. So
Excellent. I'll put links to all of that up in the show notes for this podcast episode as well, so people can get to the show notes and follow from there as well, and hopefully support you and get a copy of the book too.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Well, Simon, that was very enlightening. I feel like there's a long road to go still, and I still have a lot to do in regards to optimizing my site. But thank you hugely for those tips and sharing all your knowledge with the Joomla Beat listeners as well.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. It was really fun to be on the podcast. I couldn't dream of being on the podcast myself compared to a few years ago.
Excellent. Awesome. Thanks for your time, Simon.
Okay, well, thank you for your time too, and we'll be in touch.
Joomla experts, high-end users, creators, and, really, anyone you should be listening to.
This is Joomla Beat Podcast with your host, Peter Buey.
So thank you, Simon, so much for joining me on the podcast episode. Like I said in that interview, if you want to follow any of the links, resources, or even get a copy of his book, make sure you jump on to the Joomla Beat show notes at joomlabe.at/EP92. Whoa, 92, really? We're progressing quite well.
Another 8 episodes till the big one.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so now let's get James Morrell back on the show to talk about the next bit in the SEBLOD training course. We've spoken about putting the app together, building the pages, the fields, displaying them on the front end, and now he's going to talk about the application or the app aspect and how you can package up what you've just built or install pre-packaged stuff. So this is pretty exciting stuff.
Hi Pete, in this week's tutorial we're going to look at SEBLOD apps and specifically using the comments application, which can be downloaded off seblod.com with the VIP membership, and implementing that on our gallery item content type, which we've been playing with over the last couple of weeks. So when you click on one of your gallery item content items, you're going to go through to a content page where then you can leave a comment if you're a logged in user. So you do need a Seblod VIP membership in order to access those applications, but I really wanted just to showcase how powerful they were and how easy they make using Seblod, because they come packaged already with the forms, the lists, the fields, the templates, everything, all the Seblod elements that you need in order to achieve whatever the app's trying to achieve, like build some comment functionality or whatever it is. So I wanted to give users an insight into that and how to implement those things. And then they could make an informed decision about whether if they want to get serious using Seblod, whether they think a VIP subscription will really help them building Joomla and Seblod websites.
Great. So this is really stepping up the game and getting into some of the more interesting bits of Seblod too.
As a special offer at the moment as well, Seblod.com is offering 20% off all VIP memberships. So it's a really great time to start with those VIP memberships and downloading applications if it's something that you're interested in.
And thank you, James and Seblod team there. I did have a look at a couple of those just before too.
All right. So I hope it's useful. Thanks again for having me on, and we'll see you next week.
Right, so if that is the first time you heard James, make sure you jump on to the Joomla Beat website, joomlabe.at/Seblod, the Seblod, and you can get to the beginning of this training course where there's a big overview video that we did with James back in the office, I think in 2014, when we first had a look at Seblod and what it could do. He gave us the full rundown, but then this training course breaks it up and goes through every last little bit. So thank you, James, and thank you, Seblod.
And is that about a wrap?
Yep, that's a wrap. So what now what?
Well, I guess we can ask for some reviews, guys. If anybody wants to review this podcast, you can jump onto iTunes or Spreaker and hopefully give us a good 5-star rating.
Love the 5-star ratings.
Yeah, Peter's especially likes those.
Yes. I'll make sure next week I'll jump on to iTunes and grab a couple of those so we can read them out and thank our listeners.
Definitely.
Excellent. So let's wrap things up. Until next time, everyone, please make sure you keep your websites safe and secure and make sure you keep them backed up. Right, bye.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Joomla Beat podcast, bringing together the community of designers, developers, fans, and users from around the globe. Joomla Beat. JoomlaSEO.at